My parents gave her everything growing up. The praise, the attention, the last slice of cake, the big bedroom with the windows and the view, the benefit of the doubt, even when she lied, the silence when I cried. Ashley was their golden child, and I was there. I grew up in a house where fairness was optional and favoritism was just another word for family tradition. If Ashley skipped school, she was stressed. If I got a B+, it was what happened to the A. She crashed my mom's car once and got a "be more careful next time, sweetie." I chipped a mug doing the dishes and got grounded for a week, but I stayed quiet. I swallowed it all. I thought that if I worked hard enough, was good enough, maybe they'd see me too. As when I got into a top university, full scholarship, honors program, no one showed up at graduation. Ashley missed 2 classes in community college and got flowers and a spa day for trying her best. So I left. I built my own life. Quiet, independent, successful. I stopped expecting phone calls on my birthday. I stopped trying to earn love that was never for sale. Years went by. And then my parents died. First my mom, then 3 months later my dad. Sudden, quiet, no warning, no goodbyes. I flew back for the funerals. I stayed in the guest room. Ashley had already claimed the master bedroom, of course. She cried the loudest, made the speeches, took over every conversation like she always did. And then the will was read. Everything was left to me. The house, the retirement accounts, the lake cabin, even Mom's antique jewelry box Ashley always said she'd inherit. I expected a scene. I got a war. Ashley screamed, accused me of manipulating them, said I must have changed the documents, called me a liar, a thief. "That was supposed to be mine," she kept yelling. "They wanted me to have it." And maybe they did, but they didn't say it in writing. So I looked her dead in the eyes and I told her something that shut her up for the first time in years. "You can have it." I gave it to her, every penny. But I gave it to her with one condition, and I promise you, it wasn't forgiveness. Growing up, I used to think there was something wrong with me. Not in a dramatic woe is me kind of way, but in a quieter, colder sense. Like something in me was fundamentally off. Maybe I wasn't lovable. Maybe I was just forgettable. You start believing that when you're constantly overlooked, constantly outshined by someone who lives under the same roof, eats the same meals, calls the same people mom and dad. And my sister Ashley had this magnetic energy. Even when she was a toddler, she commanded every room like she was born for an audience. Big curly hair, louder than life laugh, always twirling in dresses and stomping in rain boots even when it wasn't raining. She had the kind of presence you couldn't ignore, and our parents, well, they never even tried. Our house was a modest 3-bedroom colonial with peeling white paint and a backyard overrun with wild daisies. My dad was obsessed with keeping the lawn neat, and Mom would light scented candles every evening like that made us the perfect family. It always smelled like cinnamon or vanilla, like comfort, until you realized the warmth stopped at Ashley's door. Ashley's room was a dream. Bay window with flowing sheer curtains, a 4-poster bed with fairy lights, stuffed animals that rotated seasonally. Mine was next to the laundry room, small and dark, and the carpet always slightly damp from the nearby utility sink. I called it the bunker. The first time I realized how different we were treated was Ashley's 7th birthday. She had a backyard party with clowns, a cotton candy machine, a magician who pulled live doves from a hat. I had the flu that day. I remember lying in my bed, listening to the sound of laughter outside, the pop of balloons, Ashley's squeals of delight. No one came to check on me. Not once. At the end of the day, someone slid a cupcake into my room like I was contagious. It was missing frosting. Ashley was a hurricane, and they loved the storm. I was the stillness that followed. The part no one remembered. She got into trouble constantly, skipped homework, threw tantrums in grocery stores, lost things she was told not to touch, and every time Mom and Dad made excuses. "She's just creative," they'd say. "She's spirited." Meanwhile, I was the straight A student. I did my chores without being asked, remembered to feed the dog, packed my own lunches. But when I forgot to unload the dishwasher once, my dad went on a rant about discipline and expectations. I stood there for 15 minutes getting lectured while Ashley sat on the couch, eating cereal straight from the box and giggling at cartoons. That kind of thing changes you. It wasn't just about gifts, though those told their own story. Ashley got a DSLR camera for Christmas, the year I got a knockoff planner from the dollar store. They said, "We know you love to be organized." I was 13. I wanted a guitar. I got a calendar. When Ashley was 17, she opened a credit card behind our parents' backs and maxed it out on clothes and tickets to Coachella. My parents paid it off without blinking. She made a mistake, they said. She'll learn. When I asked for $120 to buy a college prep course book, my dad scoffed. "What are you, a charity case?" Ashley could burn the house down and get praise for being passionate. I could clean every room and still be told I missed a spot. There was one night I remember vividly, maybe because it was the first time I truly broke inside. I was 15. I just found out I was nominated for a regional writing award. I came home with the letter in my hand, excited beyond words. I walked into the kitchen where Mom was chopping carrots and Ashley was painting her nails with glitter polish at the table. I said, "Mom, guess what? I got nominated." Before I could finish, Ashley screamed. She'd spilled the nail polish on the tile. Bright pink goop was spreading across the white floor. My mom shrieked, dropped the knife, rushed over to help her. The letter slipped from my fingers and fluttered to the ground unnoticed. Later that night, I found it in the trash, still unopened. The pain wasn't sharp. It was dull, lingering, like walking around with a rock in your shoe every day until you start limping without even noticing. Once, I got strep throat so bad I couldn't speak. My fever was over 103. My mom gave me ginger tea and said, "We'll take you in if it gets worse. Ashley's soccer tryouts are today, and I can't be late." I stayed home alone, curled up in bed, tasting blood in my throat while outside the car pulled away with laughter inside it. Eventually, I stopped trying to be seen. I stopped bringing home awards. I stopped talking at the dinner table. I started journaling, writing stories where the quiet girl had powers, where she saved the world, where she mattered. My parents would say things like, "We're so lucky to have such a mature daughter," as if maturity were a gift I gave them, not a defense mechanism I built from years of neglect. Ashley got affection. I got approval. It wasn't the same. I kept track of every moment, every subtle dismissal, every ignored cry, every time I made them proud, and they forgot 5 minutes later. I stored it away in a place they couldn't reach. And when I left for college, I promised myself I would never ask them for anything again. The first time I told someone about this, really told them, they asked me why I never confronted my parents. The truth? I didn't want their apology. I didn't want them to suddenly treat me better. I wanted them to realize they never saw me at all. Because the worst kind of heartbreak isn't when someone stops loving you. It's when you realize they never tried. And that's what they left me with. Not trauma, not even hate, just silence. I left home the day after my high school graduation. Not out of rebellion or anger or even some dramatic need to be free, but because staying felt like suffocating. I packed my bags, my acceptance letter to a top university in hand, and boarded a bus at 6 a.m. without fanfare. No one cried. No one took photos. My mom hugged me at the door with one arm while holding her phone in the other, mid-conversation with Ashley about hair appointments. My dad handed me $50 in a wrinkled envelope and told me to stay smart. That was it. College was my first taste of clean air. I had a dorm room that wasn't next to a washing machine. I had roommates who noticed when I walked into a room. I had professors who said things like brilliant and impressive without comparing me to someone else. I thrived. I double majored in the English and sociology, worked part-time at the library, and spent weekends volunteering with at-risk youth. My world expanded beyond the walls of a house that never felt like home, but I never stopped wondering what it would have been like to grow up with parents who actually saw me. I kept my distance. I called on birthdays, sent the occasional holiday card, but I didn't go back. I didn't want to. Every time I heard Ashley's name, even in passing, it was like a cold wind ran through my chest. My parents only reached out when they needed something. More specifically, when Ashley needed something. "Sweetie, Ashley's car broke down, and she's short on rent this month. Could you help out just this once? Your sister's trying to start a small business and just needs a little capital. Think of it as an investment. She's been through a lot lately. Can you cover her phone bill while she gets back on her feet?" It was always just this once. Always temporary, always an emergency, and always about Ashley. Not once did they ask if I was okay. Not once did they check how school was going, or congratulate me when I landed my first paid internship. I'd hang up the phone and stare at my reflection in the window of my tiny apartment, wondering why I still let it hurt. But I did. I built a life in spite of the emptiness. I got a graduate degree, published essays in academic journals, and eventually landed a job in nonprofit policy advocacy. I rented my first solo apartment, a small but sunlit place on the top floor of an old brick building that overlooked a park where dogs chased frisbees and kids screamed with joy. Sometimes I'd sit by the window with tea and wonder what kind of parent I'd be someday, whether I'd notice the quiet child. Years passed. I dated, traveled, made friends who felt more like family than anyone I shared DNA with. I even adopted a cat named Finch, who followed me around like a shadow. On the outside, I was successful, stable, fulfilled, but I carried this hollow space inside me, like a room in a house I never entered but always knew was there. A room called home, where warmth was conditional and love had a name that wasn't mine. Then one year, out of nowhere, my mom called just to talk. No requests, no Ashley, just a casual, "How are you?" I remember freezing in the middle of the grocery store, my hand hovering over a box of cereal. I answered like I didn't notice the shift, but I did. She talked about the garden, the weather, her favorite TV shows. It was strange, nice even. For a moment I thought maybe things were changing. 2 weeks later she called again. This time Ashley had totaled her car while driving without insurance. Could I help? Of course. I didn't. There's something exhausting about being needed only when it's convenient. I didn't want to be the backup plan anymore. Still, I couldn't completely let go. There was always this faint thread of hope that maybe one day they'd call just to say they were proud, that they missed me, that they loved me. That thread kept me tethered to a concept of family that was mostly fiction. When holidays came around, I spent them with friends, potluck Thanksgivings, secret Santa parties, New Year's Eve countdowns, with strangers who became confidants. And every time someone said, "You're like family," a part of me ached with both gratitude and grief, because I finally knew what that word could mean, and what I'd never had. The last time I saw my parents before everything changed was at Ashley's baby shower. I was 31. They had forgotten to send me the invite, and I only found out because a cousin mentioned it offhand in a group chat. When I arrived, late and awkward, my mom blinked like she'd seen a ghost. My dad gave me a quick side hug and said, "Didn't think you'd come." Ashley looked radiant. She always did. She hugged me like nothing was wrong. Like there hadn't been years of silence, one-sided phone calls, emotional neglect. And for a moment, standing in the middle of that Pinterest-perfect backyard with its balloon arch and custom cookies, I almost believed I was part of the picture. But I wasn't. I left early. No one noticed. That was the moment I accepted something I should have understood years ago. I was an accessory in my own family, useful when needed, forgotten when not. And despite everything I had built, degrees, accolades, friendships, stability, I still carried the ache of being unwanted. I wasn't angry. Not anymore. I was just done pretending. It started with a voicemail from my dad. His voice was quieter than I remembered, less commanding, more uncertain. "Hey, kiddo. Your mom's been feeling a bit off lately. Doctor says we should run more tests. Just thought you should know." No urgency. No plea for help. Just a strange, floaty message that felt more like a weather update than a health crisis. But something about it made my stomach knot. A week later, my cousin sent me a photo. Mom in a hospital gown, pale and visibly thinner. She hadn't told me. Dad hadn't followed up. I called and he brushed it off. "She's just tired. You know how dramatic your cousin can be." I booked a flight that night, and the house looked smaller than I remembered. Or maybe I'd grown. The shutters were cracked, the garden overrun with weeds, the porch swing was missing. I stood there on the front steps, suitcase in hand, staring at a place that I once felt so cold, now quietly decaying. Inside, the silence was loud. I found Mom asleep on the couch, a knit blanket over her legs, her face drawn and sunken. She stirred when I touched her hand, blinked twice, then whispered my name like she hadn't expected me to come. I stayed. At first, it was just a week, then 2. I extended my remote work schedule, shifted meetings, made it work. When her diagnosis came back, late-stage ovarian cancer, I didn't ask questions. I just unpacked my suitcase and moved into my childhood bedroom, the bunker. Ashley called once. She cried on speakerphone, said she couldn't come home right now because her toddler had a rash and her boyfriend was working overtime. She promised to visit soon. She didn't. Dad tried to hold everything together, but he wasn't built for caregiving. He shuffled from room to room, checking calendars, cooking boxed mac and cheese, running errands with lists that made no sense. Eventually, I took over. Grocery shopping, pill schedules, hospice coordination, late night wake ups when Mom cried out from the pain. She softened over those weeks. Maybe it was the medication or the fear or the quiet moments when I brushed her hair, and she realized I hadn't left because I needed something. I stayed because I cared. She started telling me stories, little ones, about her own childhood, about how she used to sing in choir, about the first time she met Dad. They were small, scattered memories, but they felt like glimpses into a person I never really knew. Sometimes she'd squeeze my hand and say, "You're a good daughter. I'm sorry if I didn't say that enough." I never replied, not because I didn't want to, but because I didn't know how to accept a kindness I had never learned to receive. 6 months passed like fog. She passed quietly one morning while I was making tea. I found her with her eyes half open, lips parted, as if about to say something. The silence in that room was so thick I couldn't breathe. Dad didn't last much longer. Grief hollowed him out. He stopped eating, stopped shaving, sat in the recliner for hours staring at the blank TV screen. I brought him meals he didn't touch, scheduled doctor visits he skipped. One afternoon I found him on the porch in the same clothes he'd worn for 3 days, murmuring my name like it surprised him. 3 months later he was gone too. And just like that, the house was empty. I remember walking through each room after the funeral, touching the worn banister, the light switch Ashley and I used to fight over, the dent in the wall from that one Thanksgiving when a chair tipped over during a screaming match. The house didn't echo. It absorbed sound like it wanted to keep the ghosts. I wandered into the attic. Boxes of old clothes, yearbooks, Christmas ornaments coated in dust. A single drawing of Ashley as a ballerina, framed and signed in gold ink. Nothing with my name on it. It was like I had never really existed there. The lawyer called a week later. I expected paperwork. I didn't expect what came next. The will was brief, blunt. Everything, assets, properties, savings, was left to me. No division, no stipulations, just a single line. To our daughter, who always showed up, "We trust you'll do the right thing." I sat in silence, the letter trembling in my hands. It should have felt like justice, validation, a cosmic rebalancing of everything that had been so unfair for so long, but it didn't. It felt hollow. I didn't cry, I didn't celebrate. I just stared out the window of the lawyer's office, watching rain blur the edges of the world, and thought, why now? Why not when I was 8 and made dinner for myself because everyone forgot I was home? Why not when I won awards and no one came to the ceremony? Why not when Ashley called me names and they laughed it off? It was too late. That night I went back to the house and sat in the living room, surrounded by boxes of memories I hadn't unpacked. I found old photo albums, almost all featuring Ashley, family trips I barely remembered, birthdays I hadn't been part of, notes in Mom's handwriting, Ashley's dance recital, 7 p.m., Ashley's orthodontist Tuesday. Nothing with my name. I flipped through every page hoping for something, anything. Eventually I stopped searching. Instead I picked up the will again and reread it. The line, "We trust you will do the right thing," echoed louder than I wanted it to. It felt like one final burden disguised as a blessing, one more chance to be the good one, the responsible one, the selfless one. I inherited everything, but I didn't feel like I'd won. Because the truth is, sometimes you don't want the money or the house or the lake cabin. Sometimes you just want to hear, "I love you," while there's still time. And sometimes they wait too long to say it. The call came exactly 2 days after the lawyer finalized the estate paperwork. I was sitting in the kitchen of my parents' house, my house now, surrounded by open boxes, legal envelopes, and the quiet hum of the refrigerator. The place still smelled like lemonwood polish and something faintly floral, like time pretending nothing had changed. I was drinking lukewarm coffee and staring at the lake through the back window when my phone buzzed. Ashley? Of course. I knew what this was. It wasn't about grief. Ashley never called to grieve. "You opened it, didn't you?" she said the second I picked up, her voice sharp, accusing. "I did," I replied calmly. "They left you everything?" "Everything? Are you kidding me?" She sounded winded, like she'd run up a flight of stairs, probably from pacing, yelling, spiraling. Theatrics had always been her specialty. "They promised me the cabin. Mom said it was going to be mine. You know she did. She said it so many times." I didn't write the will, Ashley. Oh, don't start that crap, she snapped. You manipulated them. You got in their heads while they were weak. I wasn't even there to defend myself. I bit back the obvious. You weren't there because you chose not to be. Instead, I said nothing. I let her unravel. You don't even need it, she shouted. You were always the boring one, the one who sat in the corner reading while the rest of us lived. You think because you played nurse for 6 months you deserve the whole damn inheritance? My hand tightened around the mug. But my voice? Still quiet? I stayed. That's all. She laughed, bitter and cruel. You owe me this. You hear me? You owe me. I gave up everything to take care of this family. You ran off to live your little perfect life, and now you're, what? Saint Daughter of the Year? That one hit somewhere unexpected. Not because it was true, but because of how deeply she believed it. There was a time, years ago, when I might have fought back, argued, screamed, cried, tried to make her see me. But not anymore. I'm giving it to you, I said, cutting her off. Silence. Then, what? You can have the house, the cabin, the money, everything. More silence. You're joking. I'm not. Why would you? Because I don't want it. But I want something else. Her voice lowered, wary. What? You leave me alone. No more calls, no more emergencies, no more pretending we're family. You get everything. I get peace. It hung between us for a moment. And then, predictably, she laughed. Is this your way of feeling superior? Giving it all away to look like the bigger person? No, I said. It's my way of getting out. I could practically hear her gears grinding. Ashley didn't understand when someone walked away from a prize, especially if she hadn't finished gloating. You didn't win, I added. This isn't a gift. This is me cutting the cord. You always wanted it all. Now you have it. Let's see what you do with it. She didn't answer. I hung up. That night I stayed up late, pacing the same kitchen I once cried in as a child. The same spot where Mom used to stand, back turned, stirring the sauce while I tried to tell her about my day. The tile still had the same chip near the fridge, a scar from a dropped jar of jam Ashley once threw during a tantrum. The table still creaked when I leaned on it. The past wasn't a place. It was a trap. And I had been living in it for years. I didn't sleep much. My dreams were a mess of arguments that never ended, empty birthday chairs, and a younger version of me sitting alone in the dark, waiting for someone to ask if I was okay. In the morning I packed. I didn't take much. Just my laptop, some clothes, and a few photos I'd found buried in a box labeled Ashley's Things. One was of me as a kid, arms wrapped around a science fair trophy. No one else was in the frame. Another was a blurry picture of me and Mom baking cookies. I'd kept it not because of what it showed, but because it was the only time her arm had been around my shoulder. Before I left, I walked through the house one last time. The living room still had the worn couch, the dusty piano. Ashley used to pretend she hated playing. The hallway still had faint crayon marks behind a picture frame. Ashley's art, of course. In Mom's nightstand, I found a note. It was scribbled in a hospital notepad. Her handwriting shaky. She stayed. She showed up. That matters more than anything. It wasn't a stress to anyone, but I knew it was for me. I cried then, quietly. No sobs, no drama, just a release, slow and full. I left the note behind. Some things are meant to stay in the past. Driving away, I didn't look in the rearview mirror. I didn't call anyone to say goodbye. I didn't make some grand Instagram post about letting go or new beginnings, because this wasn't a new beginning. It was a quiet ending. And that, to me, was finally enough. I didn't leave town right away. Instead, I booked a small Airbnb about 30 miles away, tucked in the hills just outside the city limits. It was an old converted barn, now painted a soft gray with warm wooden beams and large windows that let in the morning sun. It smelled like cedar and quiet. No traffic noise, no family photos, no Ashley. I spent the first few days in near silence, walking through nearby trails, drinking tea on the porch, watching deer appear from the woods like ghosts. I slept better than I had in years. Not because I was happy. Happiness wasn't the right word, but because for the first time there was no background noise of unmet expectations. Just silence. And somehow, that felt holy. But something still felt unfinished. It wasn't about the stuff. The house, the cabin, the accounts, they meant nothing to me now. but I kept turning over a single sentence in my head. We trust you will do the right thing. That one line in the will, scribbled like a command masked as a compliment. It wasn't just about what my parents left behind. It was about what they never took responsibility for, what they never apologized for. That sentence wasn't freedom. It was the final guilt trip. So I wrote my own will. It felt strange sitting at a desk in a borrowed house planning for a life I didn't want others to interfere with, but it also felt powerful. I put down every detail clearly. Every account, every title, every scrap of inheritance. They would all go to Ashley. But only under one condition. I enclosed a letter. Not dramatic, not cruel, just honest. Ashley, I give you what you always wanted. The money, the house, the lake, the name on the deed. But I give it to you with this. The promise that you will never ask me for anything again. Not love, not forgiveness, not explanation. I'm not doing this to hurt you. I'm doing this because you need to stand alone now. We both do. Me. I had the papers notarized and delivered by a third party. I didn't want to see her. I didn't want to explain myself. There was nothing left to explain. She tried calling, of course, once, twice, then from a different number, then a blocked one. I didn't answer. Then the text came. What the hell is this? Is this some kind of punishment? Do you think you're better than me? Say something, anything. I didn't ask for this. I said nothing. 2 days later, an email arrived. No subject, just her name in the sender line. It was short, and for the first time, raw. I don't understand you, I never have, but I know you meant it this time. I can feel it. So fine. You win. Take your piece. I'll take the rest. Hey. That was the last I ever heard from her. I changed my number a week later. I moved again, this time to a different state. I found a small town near the mountains, rented a loft above a bookstore, and started teaching writing workshops at the community center. I adopted another cat, this one old and cranky, and named him Elliot. The people I met didn't know my past. They didn't know about Ashley or my parents or the will. They just knew me. And that, in itself, was revolutionary. Some nights I'd sit on the rooftop of the bookstore, wrapped in a blanket, sipping black coffee, staring at the stars. I think about how easy it is to confuse forgiveness with forgetting, but I hadn't forgotten. I had simply let go. There's this myth that giving something away is noble, that generosity is the highest form of moral victory. But what I gave Ashley wasn't generosity. It was closure. It was finality. It was an erasure of the last thread tying me to a family that had never truly claimed me. And in that decision, I wasn't angry. I was free. Months passed. One afternoon in autumn, while visiting a neighboring town's flea market, I saw her. Ashley. She was across the street, standing outside a real estate office, holding a clipboard and laughing. Flirting, probably, with a couple in their 60s. She looked radiant, dressed sharp, confident, like nothing had ever happened, like I didn't exist. I ducked behind a flower cart, heart pounding like a kid hiding from a ghost. She didn't see me. For a brief moment I imagined walking up to her, saying hi, asking how she was, pretending we were normal. But I didn't, because that version of me, the one who would have clung to the possibility of connection, was gone. I left without buying anything. Back at home, I pulled out a new journal. The first page was blank, the way I liked it. I wrote one line. Not every ending needs closure. Some just need silence. And that silence, it finally felt like mine. 3 years passed. In that time, the seasons turned like the soft pages of a book I finally enjoyed reading. I stayed in the same quiet mountain town, renewed my lease above the little bookstore, and slowly built a life that felt like breathing. I ran writing workshops for teenagers and women starting over. I helped the bookstore owner digitize her entire catalog. Every Sunday I'd sit by the window with a mug of tea and a good mystery novel, letting the sunlight sketch gold lines across the hardwood floor. For once, I was the main character in my own story, not someone else's emotional support. I had neighbors who knew my name, students who asked about my cat, and a barista who memorized my coffee order, strong, never bitter. I planted herbs on my windowsill, got back into journaling, and learned how to love the silence without feeling punished by it. I rarely spoke about my past, not because I was hiding it, but because it didn't feel like it belonged to me anymore. It was like reading a novel I didn't finish, one I eventually closed and placed back on the shelf without regret. Sometimes I'd hear updates about Ashley. usually second-hand, through old classmates or random social media whispers. She sold the house within 6 months, flipped it to a real estate investor. The lake cabin went too, part of some failed wellness retreat startup. She moved to the city, launched a lifestyle blog, partnered with shady investment brands, and spent lavishly. Designer bags, luxury vacations, a car she definitely couldn't afford, but flaunted proudly online. At first I was surprised. Then I wasn't. Ashley had always thrived on noise. She didn't know how to sit still in her own silence. And eventually that noise caught up to her. A friend forwarded me an article once. A tabloid piece with a soft headline, "Former influencer steps back to focus on family." The reality? Brand deals had dried up. Blog traffic had collapsed. One of her former partners filed a lawsuit. There was even a photo, Ashley leaving a courthouse in oversized sunglasses, face half hidden, exhausted, but still trying to look polished. I didn't feel angry or smug, just still. Then one day I got an email. Her name lit up my screen while I was waiting for water to boil for tea. Ashley. I didn't open it right away. I let it sit like an unopened letter from a past life. I swept the floor, folded laundry, watered the plants. But it lingered in the back of my mind like a flickering light. Eventually I clicked it open. Subject: none. You were right. I didn't know what to do without someone to blame. I thought I'd feel powerful with everything in my name. Turns out I was just exposed. You were the strong one. The whole time. I don't expect anything from you. I just wanted to say that. I read it twice. Not because I was emotional, but because I wasn't. There was a time when I would have clung to this. When I would have written a long, thoughtful reply, hopeful that maybe this time we could fix things. That maybe this was her first step toward redemption. I would have dreamed of family again. But now, I felt free. I closed the laptop, poured my tea, and walked over to the window. Outside, the trees were beginning to crisp at the edges, autumn slowly painting everything gold and red. The breeze tugged at the edge of the awning. My cat Elliot lay stretched across the table, basking in the light, blinking at me with that peaceful, ageless look that only animals seem to master. And in that moment, I smiled. Not because she had finally said what I'd always wanted to hear, not because it felt like a victory, but because, for the first time, I didn't feel guilty for choosing myself. Later that evening, I climbed out into the rooftop. It wasn't much, just a rusted old fire escape with 2 chairs and some potted succulents. The sky was streaked with pink and orange. A plane passed overhead, its white trail slowly vanishing into nothing. I opened my journal and flipped to a clean page. To walk away is not to lose. Sometimes it's the quietest way to win. I didn't reply to her email, not because I was punishing her, but because I didn't need anything from her anymore. Not her apology, not her acknowledgement, not her pain. Some stories don't need sequels, some apologies don't need responses, and some relationships are best left unfinished. It's strange, sitting here now, years later, writing all of this down. I never planned to. Never thought I'd need to explain anything to anyone, not even to myself. But there's something about putting it into words that feels necessary. Like closing a book I left halfway open for too long. Maybe this is a confession. Maybe it's a form of closure. Or maybe it's just a final letter to the version of me who kept waiting for someone to choose her. I don't feel angry anymore. Or sad. Or betrayed. I don't wake up reliving the things they said or the things they didn't. I no longer measure my worth by how many times I was passed over for someone louder. That version of me, quiet, overlooked, desperate to be seen, she's still here somewhere. But now, she's surrounded by peace. Looking back, I don't regret giving Ashley everything. The money, the house, the name on the will. People tell you not to reward bad behavior, but sometimes the most radical form of healing isn't justice. It's letting go. I gave her everything, not because she deserved it, but because I didn't want it. Because keeping it would have meant holding on to everything that hurt me. It would have meant becoming the keeper of someone else's damage. And I was done being responsible for everyone else's mess. There was no victory in walking away, no dramatic music or cinematic shot of me disappearing into the sunset. Just silence, just space, and over time a lightness I didn't recognize at first. Do I wonder what became of her? Sometimes. Do I wish things had been different? Maybe. But more than anything, I'm grateful that I didn't wait any longer to choose myself. And now, writing this strange, quiet story of inheritance and estrangement, of silence and screaming and finally letting go, I realize something simple, but profound. Sometimes giving people what they want is the kindest way to walk away. So I'll leave you with this. Was I cruel or was I finally free? If you were me, boys, what would you have done? Growing up in a family where favoritism is practiced doesn't always look like abuse. Sometimes it's quiet. It's subtle. It hides behind soft voices, pretty holidays, and we're just doing our best. But the damage is just as real, sometimes even more lasting, because no one sees the scars. What happened to me wasn't loud. There were no screaming matches, no dramatic fights. Just a lifetime of being overlooked, of coming second to someone who always got the bigger slice of cake, the softer tone, the benefit of the doubt. And for years, I thought maybe that was my fault. That if I was better, louder, smarter, more interesting, maybe they'd love me the way they loved her. But the truth is, favoritism is a form of emotional neglect. It doesn't just spoil one child. It quietly destroys the other. It teaches you that love must be earned, that presence isn't as valuable as a performance, and that you're only worth what you can do for others. Walking away wasn't about revenge. It was about healing. It was about refusing to spend the rest of my life trying to earn something that should have been given freely. Letting go of the inheritance wasn't weakness. It was freedom, because no amount of money or property could ever compensate for the years I spent feeling invisible. If you're watching this and any of it feels familiar, if you've ever been the forgotten child, the quiet one, the easy kid who got left behind because you didn't scream loud enough to be heard, please hear this. You are not unlovable. You are not invisible. And you don't owe anyone your peace just because they share your blood. You are allowed to walk away from people who never saw your worth. You're allowed to set boundaries that protect the person you've become. You're allowed to start over, even if it means letting go of what you were supposed to inherit, pain, expectation, or anything else. Because sometimes the greatest gift you can give yourself is distance. So now, I want to hear from you. Would you have kept the inheritance? Or done what I did? Let's talk in the comments.